Everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Test Automation, a Key to Telco Adaptation, sponsored by Ribbon. Before we begin, I will cover a few housekeeping items. On the left-hand side of your screen is the Q&A. If you have any questions during the webcast, please type your question into the Q&A box and submit your questions to our speakers. All questions will be saved, so if we don't get to answer you, we may follow up via email. At the bottom of your audience console are multiple application widgets you can use. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the yellow help widget. Here you can find answers to common questions. A copy of today's slide deck is available for download in the green resource list widget. Near the end of today's presentation, please take 1 minute to complete the survey that's open on your screen. Your feedback is extremely helpful. An on-demand version of the webcast will be available about Monday after the event and can be accessed using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier today. I would now like to turn the event over to Jennifer Clark, Principal Analyst, Cloud Infrastructure and Edge Computing, Heavy Reading. Jennifer?
Thank you, Barbara, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. Today we're going to be taking a little bit of a focused view on one aspect of automation, and that's test automation, and talking about the use of it in Telco Cloud adoption. I will be moderating the webinar. As Barbara mentioned, I'm Principal Analyst, Cloud Infrastructure and Edge Computing for Heavy Reading. I am joined by Dan Teichman, who is the Director of Solutions Marketing at Ribbon Communications, and Kobe Goryevsky, who is the Principal Product Manager for Automation at Ribbon Communications. So welcome, gentlemen. I'm looking forward to chatting with you for the next hour. Let me share with you a little bit of data that at Heavy Reading and our sister organization, Dia, we've gathered regarding the migration of the CSPs to a cloud-native environment. You'll see here where they believe they are at today in terms of the percentage of physical network functions versus virtual network functions versus containerized network functions. And while physical network functions are today 45% of their overall network functions, they expect within 5 years to be overtaken by both virtual network functions, and the most rapid growth will be in containerized network functions. If we looked at the results of last year's survey, we would see that this indicates a fair amount of acceleration in the movement to virtual and containerized functions. Last year, we saw 26% were VNFs as opposed to basically just under 40 this year, and only 14% were CNFs. So we see a doubling to not a doubling, but an increase in containerized network functions, and then within 5 years, more than doubling of the CNFs. And the question that I'm going to be interested in hearing from Dan is, is this what we were expecting, or were we thinking that the move to CNFs and containers and cloud native would be a little bit more rapid? And if it has not been as rapid as we expected, then what are some of the barriers and what are some of the obstacles that are delaying a more rapid movement? And a lot of it, I'm going to say, has to do with automation and the availability of automation to ease the transition from network functions into containers. And the last sort of data point I want to share with you on this slide is that our results showed that over 55% of the network functions will be deployed over a Kubernetes-based container as a service platform by 2028. So we are moving ahead with CNFs and VNFs, but perhaps not as fast as we expected. And one of the aspects of the industry that we have been tracking is the fact that data transformation as a whole hinges on aspects of what we call the programmable telco. So yes, improving customer experience gained the most number of responses in terms of top digital transformation initiatives. And then right behind it, we have creating a data-driven organization, accelerating cloud transformation, automating operations. So all of these are, all of the top rationale, or the second, third, and fourth, are all about taking the enormous growth that we're seeing in traffic and devices, in endpoints, and trying to deal with the very huge amounts of change that we see happening in the carrier networks, by taking all of this data swamp and turning it into a more manageable data lake, accelerating cloud transformation as a whole in order to improve our operational environment, and automating operations in general to make these transitions a little bit more agile. If we look at the barriers to deploying cloud native, yes, the first one is security. And why is it security? Is this rational? Is it just fear of the unknown? A lot of CSPs, when they move to containers, and that involves moving to microservices, they're a little bit concerned that being able to secure an individual microservice that's being called by a variety of different applications, that opens them up to security vulnerabilities. So I think we're going to be hearing a little bit more about that as well. The complexity of the operations change that's required. Again, something that screams for automation, lack of skills, we hear this all the time, lack of a clear cloud native strategy and perhaps a champion for that. And complexity of modernizing legacy software applications. Now, does that mean moving from physical to virtual to containerized? That's what we, in general, yes. And the question is, the CSPs are not yet comfortable with how that transition is made. Do they have to rewrite their applications, or can they actually migrate some of their applications? And then we get into issues of, is this really cloud native, or is it merely a putting your existing application in a network function or in a container without actually modifying it to a large degree? So how do we make that transition that is going to bring us the best ROI, that's going to give us the best improvements in terms of OpEx and CapEx overall? It's a set of very complex criteria. And that's my job, to show you how the problems and the complexities, and then to turn it over to our speakers and let them share with us how Ribbon is helping to improve the landscape here for the CSPs. So with that, let me turn it over to Dan. Who may be on mute. Dan, are you there? You know, Kobe, perhaps.
Yeah, let's give Dan just another second to join, and if not,
okay.
For him.
Oh, okay, there you go. The application wouldn't let me get off mute. I'm good. Sorry about that, everyone. Thanks, Jen, for the lead into the webinar. Kobe and I will be talking today about test automation and why we believe it's a key. But I do want to touch on what Jen just pointed out. There's many, many aspects of this migration to the Telco Cloud, and the success and the data points that are going to be relevant. So if I had way more time, we probably could cover way more topics, but I will focus today on test automation. Before I do that, though, I want to begin my portion of this webinar by looking backwards to get some guidance on looking forwards. So almost a year ago, a year and a half ago, excuse me, Jen and I did a webinar, light reading webinar, entitled Easing the Journey to the Cloud Native Communications. And in that webinar, we asked, where are you on that journey? And half the respondents said they were already on their way, slightly more than a quarter were planning, and the remaining respondents indicated they weren't even sure where to begin. So I wondered, since we did that webinar, how much progress has been made? Well, if I look back at the webinar, we focused on 3 topics. And one of the topics was managing the virtual network function and cloud network function coexistence. To Jen's point, we do expect many telcos will take their current environments and migrate network functions as needed onto a cloud native environment. So there will be a coexistence of some network functions that are virtual and some that are cloud native. So as part of that discussion, we concluded there were really 2 key attributes for success for this coexistence. One was automation to simplify the transition, and the other was a common management solution to reduce the cost of managing that coexistence. And the reason I wanted to show these numbers today is I really want to try and understand the implementation of the Telco Cloud and the adoption of cloud native designs and operation principles has really occurred, or how much has occurred since we did that webinar. I will say in my conversations with customers and my reading of market research reports, such as the one Jen just mentioned, I believe the progress has been a bit slower than we might have hoped for a year and a half ago. So why is that? Well, before I even talk about that, let's run our first poll question and see if we can get some input from the audience.
Excellent. So here's our first question, and it is, what is the most important criteria for successful adoption of Telco Cloud? Is it A, cloud native product availability from the vendors, B, automation to reduce costs and complexity, C, compatibility with existing operation systems and processes, or D, availability of qualified internal staffing and resources? Which is the most important? Interestingly enough, you posed pretty much this exact question on LinkedIn. Is that correct, Dan?
We did. So we took the opportunity when we were promoting this webinar to offer the opportunity to people to answer a poll question, and looked at this. They're all important. Not a single one of them didn't get some kind of positive recognition as being important. Automation turned out to be the one that got the highest number of votes as the most important criteria. So we'll see if that lines up with the audience today.
Absolutely. So everyone, vote now. We have a bunch coming in. Please tell us what you believe. What you believe is the most important criteria in your own network. And just hold on a second. We'll wait for a couple more. I think we're doing pretty well here. Let's push this to audience. All right. So this is what we have. Cloud native product availability is a quarter of our votes. A lot of the votes came in for compatibility with existing operation systems and processes. That's interesting. Automation, another quarter of the votes, and not as big an issue as we see with some carriers, the availability of qualified internal staffing and resources, only 8.3%. What do you think of this, Dan? Compatibility with existing operational systems and processes. Is that what you're seeing and when you talk to your customers?
It's certainly important. Let me provide 2 schools of thought here on this. It's higher than I was expecting, but I understand the concern.
Me too.
We do hear about it, and more importantly, it actually touches on that other topic we talked about on that last webinar a year and a half ago, which is having a common management solution, that common operation systems that allow you to actually transparently manage both network functions as virtualized network functions versus cloud native network functions. So I do think it's important. We may touch on some of that overall as we go through this, but I will keep the focus here on automation. I think what we hopefully will be able to explain to people is some of the advantages you get with some of the automation may minimize some of the implications you have on your existing processes.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to turn this back over to you then.
All right, thanks. So this is a common rendering of the continuous integration, continuous delivery model. And I want to point out that what we're going to focus here is on the right-hand side of that image. And as a network operator, the functions they have to perform, starting with the receipt of software from their supplier, the testing of that software, and then ultimately the deployment of that software. So perhaps it's brand new for new equipment, perhaps it's an upgrade for existing equipment. In any case, all of these are part of the process of deploying software that should be efficient and seamless. And that's why we're here, and we're going to talk about that. Unfortunately, we don't all live in an ideal world. And in fact, most network operators aren't really quite there yet. And that's one of the things we're going to discuss today. So let's start with this particular image. There are, by definition, going to be competing demands on skilled people and lab resources for testing and upgrading software. So I'm going to start by saying, okay, the software was already delivered from the vendor, and now we're at that software test stage. So at that point, because businesses don't operate in a vacuum, this is more than just a scheduling exercise, right? This actually becomes important if you've got multiple software upgrades happening across multiple products, perhaps multiple vendors in your network to meet different business needs. So this becomes a big concern. And what that actually then means is that the software upgrades themselves are perceived as having challenges, partly due to the constraints of the resources, partly due to different business needs. And because of that, decisions get made. They might skip a release, might delay a specific upgrade. I don't need that for the next 6 months while I have other more important projects. And we get that. That absolutely is part of the business we are in. Well, what that results in is you have network operators with networks that end up behind, sometimes by multiple releases, than what their vendors are rolling out as new software availability. And what that ultimately causes is a network that has missed or delayed access to security updates, to bug fixes, to new features. And this isn't a good situation, right? It's not where anybody wants to be. So let me show you one example of how this is problematic. And as a preface to this, and I do want to shed light with an actual customer example, I want to make it clear that this goes beyond this example, right? It's emblematic of what happens all too often in our industry. This customer had 4 separate products of ours, hundreds of total instances across a large network. They were several releases behind on their products, and a network upgrade was required. So between us and our customer, we knew it was going to be complicated. There's a lot of time spent with upfront planning to create what was perceived as a reasonable schedule. What happened next, honestly, is not quite the way it was planned. So following each individual product software upgrade, there were multiple post-upgrade test cycles as issues were found. And of course, that took more time than was originally allocated. In turn, this led to additional cycle time for software patches to be built and delivered, and then more cycle time to test each intermediate build before restarting the software upgrade cycles. In the end, this particular effort took more than 6 months. It incurred additional cost, and it was a frustrating experience for everyone involved. It became clear that everybody wins if there's a better way to do this. And that's really where I want to focus our conversation today. So with that, I'm going to put the same diagram back up, but talk about test automation, where we really believe that this can drive increased software upgrade success, decreased software upgrade time and cost, and enable ultimately the most important thing, which is better business results. So what is that really going to mean? Well, let me start by providing a definition, right? Test automation is the ability to automate the test generation and test execution processes. And to achieve this, what it really needs is the ingestion of network configuration and traffic data and the use of analytics to understand that data in order to generate test cases that accurately represent the network behavior, the network traffic. So what I've got here is 4 attributes of why we believe that we can deliver significant value to a customer with test automation capabilities. The first is continuous learning. So in our case, we're talking largely about our products that deal with call flows, voice over IP and video call flows, but this applies to any set of applications, to be honest. So that is, networks are dynamic. They're changing traffic patterns, they're changing network configurations. So being able to continuously learn call flows by analyzing the actual production network traffic, and then being able to automatically, through intelligent machine learning and AI, is to generate accurate test cases that represent that traffic. It has to be automated. I'll give you an example. We have a customer who's got well over 1 million calls per day. And by analyzing their traffic data using an AI/ML automated test generation process, we generated upwards of 20,000 test cases. Those are unique test cases addressing different aspects of different call flows. That's simply not possible if people had to do manual observation of the call flows and the traffic, compare it with the configurations, and then actually generate the test cases. Secondly, you've got monitoring changes and proactive alerts. So from the continuous learning, it's also possible to monitor the network changes and the impact they have on call flows, and to identify if there's potential emerging problems, right? Consider that an incremental benefit of this process. And finally, the ability to create automated custom test cases, right? So behavior in a given network operator is likely different than some other network operator. So while we as a supplier can generate test cases for features we develop, et cetera, making it applicable to a given customer is far more valuable than saying, here's a generic test case, right? Really, really important characteristic. And so what does that actually translate to? Because of test automation, or in this case, we're talking about software test automation, we believe there's a better future mode of operations that addresses some of those shortcomings in the present mode of operations. Let's start with, there will be a reduction in the upgrade complexity. Because the software upgrade process that is achievable is much more efficient, and it's more efficient because of better testing, a network operator can stay more current, and therefore they'll avoid multi-release upgrades. The exact example I talked about, where we had multiple products, multiple software releases across the network. It's also going to be possible to maintain a stronger security profile, because you'll have access to the latest security updates, which should translate into less risk and more importantly, less risk of business disruption. Streamlined software upgrade cycles also reduce the effect or the impact of waiting to do them because they take too much time or resources. Thus, my business priorities are not important to something else in my company. So if all of the processes to do this are shorter, quicker, faster, pick your favorite word, there's a big advantage, right? And finally, that dramatic reduction in test cycle time and cost will also free up those resources I mentioned at the beginning that are in contention for multiple products. So as a proof point from that prior customer example, right, we estimated if we had had some of the test automation capabilities that I've mentioned and Kobe will talk about in more detail, we would have identified 2/3 of the potential problems or the issues that were run into before the software upgrade began, and avoiding those issues along with the automated test execution with better test cases, we believe that we would have potentially dropped the overall lapse time from 50 to 70%. And that's huge. And in that case, everybody wins. So at this point, I'm going to turn over the remainder of this webinar to Kobe to go through more details. Kobe?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dan. This was a great kind of introduction, and explaining the problem is critical. And now let me show you, gentlemen, and whoever's on our webinar here, let me show you exactly how this really looks like. So over here, let's imagine that we have a customer's network. And what this automation solution is going to basically doing, it's going to be learning from the customer network itself, okay? And this is not going to be the ribbon network, but actually the customer's network. It's going to learn call flows, learn configurations, and basically recreate that in the lab environment. And in a way, in exactly the same way it behaves in the production environment. You can call it, in a sense, a digital twinning, which is a popular term going on now. And basically, we have a replica in the network for running these test cases again. And you guys know new carriers are getting added all the time. New peering carriers. SIP trunks are getting added all the time. Sometimes it's access devices getting added for different players in the telco world. And there are new access devices coming out all the time. And a network is a living, breathing environment. There are all the time new call flows that are getting added every day. And of course, new configurations added all the time. So what we can do is basically look over here on the right where we see the feature extraction aspect, or over here on the left, sorry, the feature extraction on the left, where basically the input is ingested into the feature extraction. Now, the input could be CDRs, call records, PDUs, and then we have a kind of a proprietary black box that we've been working on for a long time, which is our machine learning, and there's also a lot of AI enabled in there, which basically generates automatic test cases. And it has basically, in a sense, a test runner that is responsible for executing all these specific test cases. Now, for each test cases, it can load different artifacts inside, and then set up a test environment, and this is all automatic, execute these tests, and then create and save the test results directly to a data lake, so we can then go ahead whenever needed to kind of see and analyze and understand on our dashboards over there. So the first phase is what we're doing is we're capturing and ingesting the CDRs and PDUs that are usually associated with a call flow. Then ingesting the configuration from the production SBCs, for example. And then we have the ability to convert all those into a lab environment. So what we have to do is just switch the IP from whichever servers, from the external to the production, and get the upgrade up and running immediately. The traffic learning application. Inside, what it does is it takes these CDRs and PDUs, and it basically determines which are the unique call flows. And based on all kinds of call features that we have set up in the model, in the algorithm. And then we have basically a test generator that each of these test cases with SIP script runs and generates these. And then we run them. And we can basically recreate these call flow against the lab configuration. And we also have the twin, the digital twin there to support the process. At the end of the process, we have two more attributes that are critical. We have a module, which is our test auditor, that compares against the production, and it's as a reference. It helps us when we're comparing to the data lake, and then we can make the right decisions, check out where there are errors or problems in the process. And of course, all the solution is supported with impressive GUI and the UI, which will provide us with reports and dashboards for tracking results over time. We can compare previous results. And basically what we're doing is we're analyzing the network traffic to model these patterns. And we're using machine learnings for modeling these models. And one of the most important thing is, and I see it as the beauty of this solution, is that we can now learn from any customer's network, and this can be installed, recommended to be installed, or on-prem, or on your kind of your private cloud or a public cloud on your own instance. And there are constantly network changes, and you could be running these tests using our test automation suite even every day, and check out the different call flows that are being changed in the lab, see or whatever happened to the production, test it in the lab. And you don't only need to use this during upgrades. It can also be done just to increase the confidence of the network. And since there are changes constantly being made, it should work very well, whether it's during major upgrades or just continuous analysis on the network. So a little poll over here. Barbara, you want to take it away? And before I continue?
Thanks, Kobe. It's Jennifer again. So
Jennifer, sorry.
Oh no, quite all right, Kobe. So let's move to our next poll question. Everybody, get your finger ready to pounce on an answer here. The question is, what is the most important aspect of software upgrades that test automation ROI can deliver? Is it the reduction in software upgrade time? Is it improved test efficiency? C, improved problem avoidance with up-to-date software and patches? D, reduced risk of security breaches with an up-to-date security profile? Interesting. Or E, reduced risk of SLA compliance or non-compliance with up-to-date test cases. So, Kobe, what do you think? Everybody vote now. And while we're waiting for some of the results to come in, what do you think is going to garner the most votes, Kobe?
My guess is probably going to be. This is tricky. I think that the answers will kind of evenly distributed, but my real guess is going to be having to do with reduced risk of security breaches. Kind of that's my guess, and of course B as well. Everybody is thriving to improve their efficiency when it comes to running testing on upgrades.
I hear you. I was thinking that the problem avoidance would be significant. We'll see. And let me urge everyone to vote. We'll just hang out here for another 10-15 seconds while we get in a few more votes. Don't make liars out of us. I think we need well, I don't know. The results are looking pretty much in keeping with what we were saying. So let's move to the results here. The reduction in software upgrade time, 14, improved test efficiency, almost 20%, problem avoidance, closer to 30, risk of security, we're right on there, Kobe. So a third of our responses were directly in that bucket. And nobody seems to be too concerned with the SLA compliance, which actually I do find a little bit surprising. So what do you think about these results?
It's interesting. Strategically, that's what we were focusing on. I did not know the answers to these. This is, yeah, this wasn't as engineered ahead of time, but honestly, when customers and our partners are keeping their networks up to date with patches, with recent releases, your whole security profile is much safer. Telco, voice over IP in general, is a technology that is exposed to a lot of security risks. It's I would say in a way, a dangerous environment. There are so many different interconnections coming from all over the network. There are so many different aspects that we need to look at. And of course, everybody's hearing about fraud and different types of abuses of network. So we really want to bring the risk to the minimum. And when it comes to test automation and our new automation suite that I'm responsible of from the product side, we are constantly focusing on defect avoidance, or what we call here problem avoidance. It's a common term, defect avoidance, problem avoidance. And a lot of time and money is saved on defect avoidance, and the same goes with risk. And risk when it comes to your security. And what our R&D and engineering teams are doing at Ribbon is constantly staying up to date. And we release releases or patches for our customers that stay up to date practically every few weeks now. And that's what's really amazing with our software, with our software automation and upgrade automation.
So a true CI/CD environment.
Exactly.
So a true CI/CD environment. Yeah.
Our engineer, exactly. Our R&D is basically able to pair with any one of our partners' DevOps environment with their CI/CD. Let's imagine their Jenkins, and continuously push to an endpoint to their repository our builds that are coming, let's say every month or every 2 months, and the customer can run these builds, test them in any way they see fit. They can test it on their environment, on their lab, or with a digital twin. We can monitor, get results back to our CI/CD, to our pipeline, and basically work together with tens and hundreds of different customers in multiple branches, as long as everyone is staying up to date on the current release. That's our strategy. Strategy going forward. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, with that, let me turn it back over to you for the rest of the presentation.
Yeah. Thank you. So I'm going to give just a little bit of overview on the true benefits that we've analyzed with our initial customers. And the first thing that and these are based on real data, the reduction of software upgrade time, and automation really provides the ability for you and your network and your organization to catch up to the most recent release with much fewer testing. And this test production time really improves the efficiency of an organization, because your engineers, your teams now could be focused on testing an upgrade and a build from Ribbon, or they could be deploying a new service, some 5G technology that just came out, and the time to market is really critical. So that's one aspect. And a reduction in wasted test days also. From running incorrect or out of date test scenarios, human errors, we see a lot of that. We discussed earlier the defect avoidance and problem avoidance when you're staying up to date, and you have test automation enabled in your environment. So improved testing capabilities and being on the most up-to-date release reduces a lot of time, money, and of course the OpEx aspect. Two more over here, and we saw these on our poll earlier. So yes, the reduced risk of security breach and staying up to date with your most current software. This is critical for the profile, the overall security profile of your network. And we want to focus on that in the next few years. We are investing a lot of time, money, and professional, top of the line engineers to really bring out the most secure releases, versions, and of course new software that's out there for your networks, for our customers' networks, and of course to reduce breaches and fraud. And you're familiar with our other fraud services. And at the end of the day, this saves a lot of time, money on outages, but security also has to do with a reputation. On this webinar, there are a lot of brands, a lot of organizations. Some of them are public, and reputation is critical if we're a public company or not. And God forbid we have an outage, our share, our whole brand can get affected by that. And that's where we really want to focus on security in the next few years. And of course, number 5 over here, the reduced risk of enterprise customer or peering partners, SLA. So sometimes when we partner with different peering partners or access partners, we want to stay within the SLA and never come to a breach of that in order to avoid any other challenges, legal challenges sometimes when our network is down or part of the network is down. So yeah, there is a way. At Ribbon, we call it LEAP. LEAP is our new program, our new policy. And you'll be hearing about this. Whoever's a customer of ours and whoever isn't is welcome to reach out after this webinar. And it's all about test automation and much more, where we learn the knowledge in the customer networks. And then the accuracy is much higher when it comes to test cases and the whole overall coverage. The reduction of excessive time and different costs that are associated every time with an upgrade. Okay, that's all going to be almost eliminated once you experience our test automation suite. The velocity, much higher, faster, of course, and the ability to maintain a higher security profile. And of course, staying up to date has all its benefits when it comes to different features. And you know, we always hear about people, in a way, you know, it's nice complaining about, hey, not enough features. Well, you're a few releases behind, sir. If you stay up to date, you're going to get the newest features that our R&D and engineering teams are constantly working on new features and new technologies. So that's also great. That's it from my end. Yeah.
Thanks, Kobe. Very interesting. And and evidently our audience feels the same way. We have a number of questions, so let's move right into the Q&A. We have received in a number, as I say, but please, if you have a question, use the console to type it in and send it to us, and we will attempt to get to as many of these as we can. Here's our first question, and that is, are you working open source for this project? Which tools are you using for test execution automation? And who, I'm going to say Kobe, maybe? Yeah.
Yeah, that's good, Kobe.
I would need some more specifics on open source. This is not an open source environment on our end, but instead we're going to be using best practice and classic standard scripts that are used, or just classic APIs.
Right.
For this.
Yeah. So the common layer is the API layer. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Just a RESTful API.
Yep. Okay. Is the test automation concept focusing on the core network, or is it an end-to-end concept? And could you share a little bit more on the architectural aspect?
Yeah. Sure. This is something that I would need to dive deep specifically with whoever asked this question, but to try to give an answer, we are looking first at the core network, and it really depends on the network specifics, what is deployed there. In many cases of Ribbon partners, Ribbon telco partners, we will be covering end-to-end, almost the entire network in many cases, but it really depends on the network specifics. For instance, right now we're focused on the session border controllers for customers of ours who are familiar with our management system, our PSX. This is bundled part of our analytics solutions, and we call RAMP, our test automation suite. So it covers the core plus to answer the question.
All right, excellent. I think this is going to be for you as well, Kobe. AI and ML with SDN, this attendee sees as a way to implement automation yes. So what do you think of AM? Can we do what we're talking about here with SDN combined with AI ML?
Yes, absolutely. As long as we are able to basically ingest and receive the input from the network, mostly the calls or the configurations, then we can do software-defined networks.
Excellent. Okay. And yeah, we had a lot of questions from this one attendees about SDN, so that might be something that you all want to get back to them on. Yeah. What kind of VNF or CNF can Ribbon provide now?
We provide, yeah, sure, Dan.
So a huge majority of the network functions we provide today as a company to our customers, we can provide as virtual network functions, and we are rolling out the the cloud native function versions of our session border controller and our policy and routing server, as well as our common management infrastructure. And we'll be adding more of those as we go. Part of it's predicated on customer demand, and part of it's predicated on where we want to make our investments. But we are 100% behind both the VNF and CNF models.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to stay with you, Dan, on this one. You introduced test automation as part of the CI/CD process, which makes it seem like it is part of a cloud native implementation. Can I also apply test automation to my current network, which has a combination of appliance-based and virtual software-based products? It's a good question.
Yes, of course. So the test automation capabilities that we've talked about today and Kobe's described are designed to increase the velocity of the software upgrade process with less cost and greater success. If that same software release that's being upgraded, release X to Y, so to speak, for a given network function or workload runs on different implementation models. So this software runs on the physical appliance version versus the virtual software version versus the cloud native version, then all the values of test automation will apply. We're testing, we're driving the value of the automation of the generation and the execution of the tests, what they're applied to as in terms of a software should work across all appliances.
Excellent.
All
okay.
Implementation models.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay. Good question and answer. All right, the next one is, can you walk through an example of how you identify unique call flows in a customer network? And Kobe, that sounds like it's for you.
Sure. So first off, this is proprietary, but I will share a little bit about anomalies. And of course, the data is in the SIP headers, the metadata is in the header. We look for unique anomalies during the call flow. And what we do is we'll ingest and imagine that there are different filters. These filters are algorithms that are basically taking this in, filtering according to the rules or the attributes or the algorithm that we gave it, and then it comes out.
All right, very interesting. Okay. Yeah, I gotcha. And I'm going to turn back to Dan for this next one. Do all the ROI attributes apply across all types and sizes of service providers? That's interesting.
Yes, so they apply across any type of service provider. It doesn't matter if it's a mobile operator, a fixed network operator, someone with both networks, a cable operator. In fact, this applies also to enterprises with large networks. The value attributes apply across the board. The benefits apply across the board. What's different, perhaps, and may change in its relative value or importance is the magnitude of those benefits of those ROI attributes. If you're, going back to that example I shared, if you're a very large network with many instances of software deployed and multiple different versions of software across different products, the potential savings you have will be greater than if you're a smaller network operator. But the value attributes of what the test automation can provide and ultimately drive better business outcomes, I think applies no matter who the network operator or, like I said, even the enterprise may be.
Okay, very interesting. I'm not quite sure what to make of this next question. Perhaps you can parse it. Can you specify telco cloud environment you can support?
Can you specify the telco cloud environment you support?
Yeah.
Today, for Ribbon, we have software deployed. Well, let me actually, before I answer it that way, let me actually back up and I will give you my definition of telco cloud. There are probably many people who have similar or even different definitions. Telco cloud is a cloud environment for a given network operator. That cloud environment may be their private cloud. It may be their instance in a public cloud. That cloud environment may include, in their mind, right, applications running on virtual machines. It's very prevalent, been around for quite a while. Not quite the definition I believe is really the target. I believe the telco cloud started with virtual network functions and the NFV infrastructure and the ability to do some orchestration, as had been going on probably now for the last 8 to 10 years, maybe longer. And I believe the telco cloud is evolving to adoption of cloud native attributes and deploying microservices and containers, et cetera. Now, back to my answer about Ribbon, we currently support, like I said, a wide range of our products, especially in our Cloud and Edge portfolio, across all of those domains, in customers in both private and public cloud environments, VNFs with OpenStack, CNFs with Kubernetes. Again, we do have software that runs in VMs if people want it that way. Again, not my definition of telco cloud. And we will continue to add more and more of those capabilities, especially in the cloud native direction as we go forward.
All right, excellent, excellent. This is going to be our last question, and it's a good one to end on because it's we're looking for a little bit of blue sky work from the two of you. What would be the next evolution of a test automation framework? What's going to be next?
I believe this is next.
Into that?
I believe this is next, but if everyone's familiar with Gen AI today, how AI is generating, I think that's where we're going with machine learning and generative AI. So in a way, I think that once test automation is structured with enough data and enough history, it will actually start giving you advice and recommendations on your network in a way of how to optimize it. There are different aspects of costs related We could have stack managers scaling up and down in a very interesting way. And we could have different, just least call routing aspects, but also just pure human advice generated from AI about your network, how to improve it in real time, whether it's security or fraud, things like that, SLA, risks involved. Based on test automation, it could detect specific machines that perhaps based on logs that are in risk, all kinds of different aspects. That's where it's going, in my humble opinion.
So moving with ML and learning more of the environment and being able to proactively suggest a course of action. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
Dan, you had some input there?
Yeah, I'll take that one step further, or in addition, perhaps. Two things. One is Kobe talked we both talked about continuous learning. And so while we structured this webinar around test automation, that is the ingestion of information, the generating of the test cases, and the execution of those test cases, the continuous learning aspect, which I said there was additional value and considered it in a bonus of that process, Kobe just outlined it even more specifically, right? Which is, it is that continuous learning and the ability to respond to queries or proactively provide information, right, at an AI type of interface, indicating what should be done next. And it's not all that far-fetched or far in the future. We do something already similar in our analytics product with a capability called most probable cause, which is we will look at traffic, we'll look at traffic behaviors and identify problems and identify what the most probable cause of that problem is. And that's, to be realistic, that's not new, right? That's a very realistic application that exists today. We're talking about taking that to the next level, as what Kobe described, and going beyond that. So I do think that there's a very real future in that direction.
Yeah, very interesting. And that's a good way to end our conversation today. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Very interesting conversation. I learned a bunch. I hope all of our listeners on the webinar also benefited from the content here. And with that, I am going to close out today's webinar. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.